Ireland in the early 1840s was a land of green hills and stone villages, where families had worked the same fields for generations. In the villages, life moved to its own rhythm. Market days brought crowds into the streets, farmers selling what little they had, women carrying baskets, children running between the carts, neighbors who had known each other all their lives. Most families were poor. They lived in small cottages, sometimes a single room for everyone. The land they worked belonged to English landlords, and most of what they grew was shipped away. What remained for them was the potato, the one crop that could keep a family alive through the winter. One crop, one variety, an entire nation's survival depending on a single plant. In this video, I used AI to reconstruct what Ireland may have looked like during the Great Famine. It's not perfect, but I hope it helps you feel closer to the people who lived it. But poverty didn't mean emptiness. In the evenings, villages came alive with music and conversation. There was hardship, yes, but there was also community, laughter, and home. No one could have imagined how quickly it would all disappear. In the autumn of 1845, something strange happened in the fields. Farmers walked out to harvest their potatoes and found the leaves turning black. A smell hung in the air, damp, rotting. When they dug into the soil, the potatoes crumbled in their hands. No one understood why. Some blamed the weather. Others thought it was a punishment from God. The real cause was a fungus, carried across the ocean from America. But the people had no way of knowing that. That first winter was difficult, but families got through it. They told themselves it was just one bad year. They replanted in spring, hoping the worst was behind them. Then came 1846. The blight returned, stronger than before. Entire fields that had looked healthy in the morning were destroyed by nightfall. Across the country, the same scene repeated. Families standing in their gardens, watching their only food turn to rot. This time, there was no recovery. The crop was gone, and with it, any hope of getting through the winter. And yet, while the Irish starved, ships loaded with grain continued to leave Irish ports, bound for England. Food was still being exported. The British government, guided by a belief that the market should not be disturbed, offered little help. Ireland had food. It just wasn't for the Irish. In the villages, the mood began to shift. Markets grew quieter. Families who had always managed to get by were now counting their last meals. People started walking the roads, searching for food, for work, for anything. The hunger had begun, and Ireland would never be the same. By 1847, the roads of Ireland were filled with people. Families who had lived in the same village for generations were now walking, searching for food, for help, for survival. You could see them everywhere, mothers carrying children, fathers with hollow eyes, elderly who could barely stand. In the towns, crowds gathered outside workhouses, waiting for hours just to get a bowl of soup. The workhouses had been built for the poor, but they were never meant for this. Thousands came every day. Many were turned away. Those who made it inside found bare floors, thin blankets, and barely enough food to stay alive. Families were separated, men on one side, women and children on the other. And to receive help, many had to give up their land forever. It was shelter, but it came at a cost. Some refused, choosing hunger over humiliation. Outside, the situation grew worse. Disease spread quickly. Typhus, cholera, fever. Weakened by hunger, people had no strength to fight it. Entire families fell sick. Neighbors who had shared meals together now avoided each other, afraid of contagion. In some villages, there was no one left to bury the dead. But even in the darkest moments, people held on. Mothers fed their children before themselves. Neighbors shared what little they had. Priests and volunteers set up soup kitchens, feeding hundreds with whatever they could find. Ireland was starving, but the Irish had not given up. For many families, the hardest moment was not the hunger itself. It was losing their home. Landlords across Ireland were clearing their estates. Tenants who could no longer pay rent were evicted, sometimes entire villages at once. Families watched as their cottages were torn down, the roofs ripped off so they could never return. With nowhere to go, they took to the roads. Some built shelters in ditches, others slept in the ruins of their own homes. The countryside was filled with people who had once had a life, now carrying everything they owned on their backs. Those who stayed faced impossible choices, selling the last of their possessions, walking miles for a day's work that might pay in food, feeding the children and going without. And through it all, one thought began to take hold. A thought that once would have been unimaginable: leaving. Word had spread of ships sailing to Liverpool, to America, to Canada, a chance to escape, a chance to survive. The passage was cheap, the conditions unknown, but for families who had nothing left, it was the only hope remaining. Ireland was emptying, and the exodus was about to begin. The ports were overwhelmed. In Cork, in Dublin, in small harbors along the coast, thousands gathered every day waiting for a ship. Families who had never seen the ocean now stood at the water's edge, clutching their belongings, saying goodbye to everything they knew. The ships that waited for them were not built for passengers. They were cargo vessels, hastily converted to carry as many people as possible. Wooden bunks stacked below deck, no fresh air, no light, no privacy. Hundreds packed into spaces meant for dozens. They called them coffin ships, and the name was earned. The crossing to America took 6 weeks, sometimes more. Storms tossed the ships. Disease spread in the darkness below. Many who boarded alive never saw land again. Bodies were wrapped in cloth and slipped into the sea. But still they came, because staying meant certain death, and leaving meant a chance, however small. On deck, families huddled together and watched the Irish coast disappear behind them. The green hills fading into mist, the only home they had ever known, gone. Some whispered prayers. Others wept in silence. Children asked when they would come back. Most never would. Those who survived the crossing arrived in Liverpool, in Boston, in New York, exhausted, sick, with nothing but the clothes on their backs. A new world, a new language, a new life. They had escaped, but they had left Ireland behind forever. By the time the famine ended in 1852, Ireland had changed forever. 1 million people had died, of hunger, of disease, of exhaustion. Another million had left, scattered across the ocean to England, America, Canada, Australia. The population had dropped by a quarter in just 7 years. Ireland's population still hasn't recovered. Before the famine, 8 million people lived on the island. Today, it's barely 7. The scars are still visible. In the abandoned villages, in the language nearly lost, in a wound that never fully healed. Entire villages stood empty, cottages with no smoke rising from the chimney. Fields that had once fed families now silent and overgrown. But the story doesn't end there. The million who left carried Ireland with them. They built new lives in new lands, but they never forgot where they came from. They passed down the stories, the songs, the names. They raised families who raised families. Today, over 70 million people around the world trace their roots back to this small island. The famine took everything from them, their homes, their land, their loved ones. But it couldn't take who they were. If your ancestors left Ireland during those years, this is their story. They survived the hunger, the ships, the crossing. They made it, so that one day you could exist. 1 million never came home, but their legacy lives on.